Jesus appears to the 7 disciples. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, and Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We will come too," they all said. So they went out into the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who it was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" They replied, "No." Then he said, "Throw out your net on the right hand of the boat, and you shall get some." So they did. They couldn't haul in the net because they caught so many. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic and jumped into the water and headed to shore. The others stayed in the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from the shore. When they got there, they found a break fast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. "Bring some of the fish you have just caught," Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard, dragged the net to shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net hadn't torn. "Now come and have some breakfast," Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who you are?" They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the 3rd time Jesus had appeared to the disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus said, "Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." A 3rd time, he said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked this question a 3rd time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep. I tell you the truth. When you were young, you were able to do what you liked and dress yourself and went everywhere you wanted to go. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will dress you and take you wherever you don't want to go." Jesus said this to let him know what kind of death he would glorify God. Then Jesus told him, "Follow me."
Thank you so much. This has been the Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Thank the youth this morning for getting involved. And that's one of the things I do want to talk about is how we all get involved in everything. And this morning we had some prayer warriors coming up and some people who needed prayer. And I don't like to push people to the altar, but sometimes that is a necessary place to pray. And I know you can do it right in your chairs. I understand that. But the thing is, when you come up here, we get to lay hands on and we get to have the power of the whole congregation behind it, that prayer. And you know, sometimes that changes everything because that power of that much spirit upon a person changes their lives. And it helps everything come out a little bit better and makes them stronger and more powerful. Am I saying it right, Kathy? I am, aren't I? And so I'm going to encourage people, if you got something going on and you're really needing to get that extra little boost, that extra little strength, head for the prayer rail because that's a good place to head for when it's time like that. So the reading came from John 21, 1 through 19, and this is a new normal that Jesus Christ is trying to set up. And the normal is to be devoted to others. And I'm going to say it like this, be devoted to sheep. We'll call it sheep devotion, okay? And then I'll say, bah, all right? And you'll understand what I mean. We're all there sometimes when we need others to strengthen us. Now, I was reading about this, and one of the stories that came up is there's this Presbyterian pastor, and he wanted to take his family on a vacation to Scotland, which we would like to go to, too. Maybe one day it'll happen, you know. Ireland, too. His daughter had two requests on the trip. One of them was that she'd be able to play golf, and the other one was that she'd cuddle some sheep. All right. Now the pastor doesn't know how this is going to happen, and he's figuring this is going to cost a bunch of money too. He didn't know how he was going to fulfill the request, but early in the trip, they arrived in the Isle of Iona. Has anybody ever been to Iona? Okay, good. Well, then I'm going to tell you something new. It's off the west coast of Scotland, and it's where St. Columba founded the first monastery in the 6th century. And it's the point from which Christianity grew in Scotland. That's where it came from. It kind of grew from that area and out. When they reached the lobby of St. Columbia Hotel, the pastor asked, of course, the question for his daughter to the receptionist, where can we go to golf? And he said, well, we have an 18-hole golf course right here in Iona, and you can get the clubs and the balls and everything you need here for free. He said, but I got to warn you, the groundskeepers are sheep and cows. They keep the grass cut, and they fertilize. He wasn't kidding. That's actually how they keep the golf course in Iona. And so the pastor has both problems solved for his daughter. He's made her as happy as she could be. She's golfing, and on the way, she's sitting down and cuddling the sheep. You know? And if I've never been there, but this is how they gave me the picture. It was like, it's just lovely greenery that's windswept. And it's an island, so it's surrounded by water, and a place where you could practice what could be called sheep devotion. But see, Iona really, it's not the norm, is it? A place like that is not a place we are every time, where we can do the thing that we really love and cuddle with the sheep. Let's get back to reality. Let's talk to something that's probably normal in our lives. The whole United States, matter of fact, I dare to say probably the whole world is caught up in itself. And one of the things we're caught up in that's distracting from our spiritual life is work. We are sorely devoted to work, our jobs. Take, for example, Silicon Valley. You know, that's in California, and it is brutally competitive. My brother lives in that area, and it's like if you're going to get a job, it's 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. And if you don't, there's another person right behind you that will. And it's that competitive. The magazine Christianity Today reports on the Apple's reputation. It is one of the most intense workplaces in the valley. You guys, have you ever heard of Elon Musk? Okay, you know who he is. Okay, good. Well, founder of Tesla and SpaceX, and unfortunately, this is how he's said to treat his workers, like ammunition. They are used until exhausted and then discarded. And I know what that feels like. I've seen my wife in that same position as a nurse, used until they're burnt out and then discarded, and they just find another young person to put in there. This means that we consider work to be a central part of our existence. We place it that high above things. What happens when you place something above God? What do you call it? An idol. And sometimes we cross that line. Work becomes more important than our spiritual journey. It does. In a recent article by Christianity Today, the writer states that our identity and sense of value become tied up in our productivity. And we feel that we must prove ourselves worthy of our own jobs. And that's by making it a central focus in our lives. aren't we supposed to do God and family first? Aren't those supposed to come first? Right. This is what I would call living by the norm right now. Most families in the United States, matter of fact, in the world, are placing work above anything else, including their family, because they think they have to have the money to pay the bills first. And what is it that's different when that becomes your focus, when you have to have the money to pay the bills first? Everything that you do, when it's wrapped around work, can easily fall apart. It can just, go to nothing, be dust or rust or brokenness, like broken families and broken hearts. What is the one thing people want the most of the people that they love? One thing. My wife I'm surprised she's not coming up here and smacking me. Time. We want their undivided attention. Let me say it again, their undivided attention. In other words, Mark, do not answer that email or that text. This is my time to be with family, right? There's late night conference calls, shrinking leisure time, the expectations that you're always on call. You always got to answer the phone, and our cell phones are our worst enemies sometimes because we feel like we got to answer it now and get it done. And it eats away at our lives. And it pushes us, and many of us feel it. And I'll ask for an amen in a minute, okay? It pushes us beyond our limits sometimes. Can I get an amen? Yeah, it does. It pushes us beyond our limits. See, the first followers of Jesus are feeling exhausted and stressed. And when they go fishing, they don't really, they're on Sea of Tiberias, or it's called the Sea of Galilee sometimes. And there are fish there. They have been out 7 of them all night long, and they're experienced fishermen. See, they just didn't know what to do. Jesus had died, and then he came back, and they didn't know what the plan was. So they went back to the thing that they knew. Let's go fishing. Let's make some money. Right? These are experienced fishermen. They've been out all night, and they have been unsuccessful in catching a fish, which is odd to begin with. 1 fish? Come on. They're seasoned, experienced fishermen. So they're coming back in, and they don't realize this is Jesus sitting out there, do they? They just think it's somebody on the shore side with a fire making breakfast for himself. And they get close, and Jesus says, throw your nets down on the right. A fisherman knows this. The fish are all over the place. It doesn't matter whether it's right or left or behind or but they do what Jesus says. They throw it, on the right. Okay, well, whatever. We'll give it a shot. And they pull it up. 152 fish. Is that what it was? 152? Big fish. Not the throwbacks. Okay? Not the big fish. You see, they're trying to figure out what to do. But the greatest news is that in times of stress, and I haven't said this enough because I've talked to several people lately, and I'm not making a big enough point of it, so I'm going to make a big point of this. I'm going to make it an issue. I'm going to make it the next thing that you think about. Have I got your attention yet? Are you listening to me? In times of stress, the good news is that's when Jesus shows up and takes care of you. Can I say it again? He shows up and he takes care of you. One of our biggest problems is we're not looking for him to be there. Now, I've told you about this before in our ministry and in our mission and in our outreach, that we got to look for where God's at work and get involved in that, because that's what Jesus Christ did. He looked for where the Father was at work, and then he got involved in that, and it was brilliant. And it was brilliant, right? So I tell you that about mission and outreach and ministry, but what I'm trying to tell you is in your times of distress, you need to be looking for where Jesus is. It needs to be this conscious effort, guys. You can't just let it go. You got to look for him. Because sometimes he's right in front of you and you can't even see it. He's sitting there on the shoreline waiting for you to check him out. And you're looking everywhere but the shoreline. See, I do that same thing, and then I wonder, and things get worse and things get worse. We feel like we're under attack right now. We're not the only couple here that feels that way. We feel like something's going on and the devil's attacking us. And here's my thought for myself this morning. Mark, would you look and see where Jesus is at work? Because I can guarantee you he is there in the midst of that. He's going to take care of it. That's what Jesus does. See, he's knowing that they've had a long night and they're not knowing what to do. And Jesus Christ is sitting on the shoreline with breakfast. And he knows that they've had a hard night, and he says, I'm going to fix that night. I'm going to do it in 10 seconds. They've been out there 8, 9, 12 hours. I'm going to do it in 10 seconds. I'm going to fix that whole thing. Throw your net to the right. And they pull up so many fish, it's hard for them to drag them in. And Jesus doesn't stop there. He takes care of the first things first, what's necessary for them. But he doesn't stop there. Then he says, sit down. It's time to have some breakfast. Because you're hungry. You've been working all night. You're wondering what's going on. We need to have breakfast and have a little conversation here. You need to know what I'm expecting of you. And Jesus does not leave us in the dark. He will let us know what he's expecting of us. If he asks us to do something, he will enable us to do it. He'll give us the power to make it happen. Every single time. Every single time. Our fault, our problem, our hitch in the get-along is we're not looking for where he's at in that situation so we can figure out what he's trying to tell us. We'll sit back and go, where are you, Lord? Where are you, Lord? He's usually right in front of us. Thing is, the way that God works is he could easily take Dustin and work for Mark. And Dustin could walk up and say, everything okay, Mark? Well, no, I'm having this problem, that problem. Well, let's pray about it. And there's Jesus at work right there for me, right? I walked in the other day, I'll tell, Ashley was doing the board, and she thought I was being helpful, I think. I was being helpful. Amara and Ever there, and I had promised Amara that I'd pray with her. I'd play with her. Yeah, play with her. And so I couldn't break my promise. I said, well, the next time I come, I'll take some time and play. So we played for about 45 minutes until they wore me out, and Ashley had to save me. But see, here's the thing. What I was telling her in the text is, I needed that light in my life as much as they needed me to play with them. I needed the light in my life. God was doing twofold. He was working on Amar and Everett, and me too. But you know what? I was looking for it. I was looking for the spot, and I found it. He's not only going to just take care of our immediate needs. He's going to make sure that we're nourished. I mean, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. He's going to make sure we're nourished completely, in abundance in our lives. He's going to do that for us too. See, sheep devotion is like this. After breakfast, Jesus says to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? I think he's talking about the other disciples there, like a brothership kind of love. And Jesus does not ask Peter about his willingness to put in long hours or to do the nonstop effort, to be pushed beyond his limits. Instead, Jesus asks him about love. Do you love me more than these? And Peter says, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus says to him, well, feed my lambs. For Jesus, if we're wanting to show him our love, he's telling Peter, if you want me to know that you love me, if you want to show it to me, feed my lambs. That. how we show our love to Jesus Christ. Yes, I like to say it, Jesus, I love you. But when I do something for somebody, that changes everything. Jesus knows I love him. For Jesus, love for him is not expressed by sitting around and thinking about how great Jesus is. Instead, love is expressed by actions, the feed and the care for others, for other people that Jesus describes as his lambs, which that are sitting all around me. And Jesus is calling us to a new normal, not one that's wrapped around our devotion to work, one that's wrapped around our devotion to each other. To each other. That's why the prayer rails are so important. That's us being wrapped around our devotion to each other. We'll just call it sheep devotion from now on. But Jesus is not finished with Peter. A second time he says to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter says to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus says to him, tend my sheep. You be the one that walks into their lives and says, how can I help? What can I do to serve you? What can I do to serve you? That was the point of the foot washing, was to learn that. What can I do to serve you? And you know what? Sometimes it's as simple as just words, guys. A touch on the shoulder. I'm here with you. We got Jesus. It's sometimes really that simple. So, now Peter has to answer him 3 times. And probably we know that's because he denied him 3 times. And the way Jesus is asking about the love is in different ways too, by the way. One's like a brotherhood. One's like a family. And the other one's like agape. It's like, do you love me like I love you? Jesus is saying. It's a different kinds of love that he's asking about. But it does stress Peter out a little bit because he's wondering, why has he asked me 3 times? So each of his answers has an effect of canceling out one of Peter's denials. And Peter feels hurt because Jesus has asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? No doubt he feels guilty and ashamed of the 3 denials. But Jesus doesn't throw Peter's mistakes in his face. He doesn't remind him of his failures. He doesn't do that at all. He doesn't make him feel even worse about himself. Instead, he simply says this: if you want to show me, feed my sheep. Show me your love that way. With these words, Jesus forgives Peter and puts him back on the right path. So Jesus not only says, come on, I'm going to help you with your everyday needs. Then he says, look, I'm going to feed you because I care about you. I want you to be nourished. Now I'm going to put you back on the right path, and that is feed my sheep. And that's what's most important. Each other. Each other. That's what's most important. And this is the new norm as well. As we seek to follow Jesus today, and we can do this knowing that we have been forgiven and restored by Jesus Christ as followers of Christ, we don't have to, like the pastor's daughter, go cut a real sheep, although that is really calming. And goats are real calming too, I noticed. You know, it is real calming. But we can actually hold each other up in prayer, help each other in our lives. And this is also very comforting. Very comforting. The risen Jesus always meets us before he gives us our work. Before he says, this is your assignment, he's already met with us in our dreams and in our prayers and in the conversations with other people to prepare us for that. Mark didn't just become a pastor and be able to speak in front of a bunch of people, right? It didn't happen that way. That took 20 years. Because the first time he called me, you know what I said? Are you kidding me? But the next time he called me, he had put me in the service for long enough to learn how to lead. He had put me in teaching assignments. That's what I did at Fort McClellan, Alabama. I taught 300 kids every single day. I taught them how to use weapons, but that's a whole different story. You know, And see, but then that was not it. In every job that I have, he brought me to the leadership position. Then he taught me how to teach people. And that took about 20 years. And teaching people, what I mean by teaching people is, what did you learn today? You learn that you have to look for Jesus in every situation. Not just the ones that you're trying to give out or hold out Jesus to, but in every situation in your own life. And when you talk to somebody that has a problem and needs some solutions, that's when you tell them, we got to be looking for Jesus. We got to be looking for him now in this circumstance, in this situation. He is here somewhere. We just have to open our eyes, open our hearts, open our minds, and see him. The gospel says it is so. He is there. And he never leaves us alone. Ever. He's always there when we just call his name. Two of us gather, he's there. Imagine the power that we have right here all gathered together. Now, once he's done that, once he's strengthened you, once he's fed you, then be aware. You are his body, his hands and his feet, and he's going to send you. You got a purpose here somewhere. You're the one that other people are looking for when they're looking for Jesus. You're it. Tag. As Amara said this morning several times. You're it. We could do this in a lot of different ways, like caring for our children here, making a safe environment, like taking care of our youth, making sure they get the experience of camp and doing things that are oriented to serving other people. Like we're about to let people, I don't want to use the word auction. What word did we come up with, Cody, for that? Serve them. To serve them so that they can have the money to go to camp. Okay? We're going to do those things. See, the norm of work devotion makes our jobs the central part of our existence, and it leaves us completely exhausted. That's what work does for us. But the norm of sheep devotion, that keeps Jesus at the center of everything and gives us a life worth living. A life worth living. And that's what I have, is a life worth living. And that's what you have, is a life worth living. I hope you were able to glean something from that this morning. We switched the order of worship around on purpose, and the purpose was this. We wanted to feed you first, and then we wanted you to respond with worship by tithes and by singing and by doing that stuff. But we also want to educate you too. So we've got a little video we're going to show you, and I want you to see it, and this will tie into some of the things I've been talking about the last couple of weeks too. And then Kim's going to say a few words for us.
Two men bring an offering to the Lord, one of the fruit of the ground, the other the firstborn of his flock. God accepts one and rejects the other. Why? Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. The word tells us clearly that the offering Abel brought was the firstborn of his flock. But it doesn't say that Cain brought the first fruits of his crops. It simply says, in the process of time, Cain brought an offering. Cain harvested his crops and over time gathered enough to bring an offering. It was an offering on Cain's terms. God accepted Abel's offering because it was the first of his increase. Cain's offering was rejected because it wasn't the first of his. Giving the first to God requires faith. When a firstborn lamb is born in a flock, it's not possible to know how many more lambs that you might produce. But Abel gave his firstborn lamb in faith, whereas Cain made sure he had enough for himself before giving to God. Many of us treat God the same way as Cain, making sure we have enough money before we see if there's anything left for God. Even if we give from what's left over, God can't accept the offering because it's not the first fruit. Other stories emphasize this truth. In the account of the fall of Jericho, the Lord gave strict instructions that the Israelites were not to keep any of the spoils from Jericho. All of it belonged to him, the Lord declared. Jericho belonged to the Lord because it was the first city conquered in the Promised Land. It was the first fruits. God withheld his blessing from Israel when one man took some of the spoils for himself. The first belongs to God. There was much more at stake than money when Abraham offered his firstborn son Isaac. When God asked for his son, Abraham didn't wait to have 10 sons before giving Isaac. He gave the first when he only had one to give. Abraham had only the promise of having more sons. It took faith for Abraham to offer Isaac, faith that God respected and blessed. And God did the same for us. He gave his first in the form of his Son, his first and only begotten Son, who was given to us while we were still sinners. God gave Jesus in faith that we might one day give our lives to him. The gift of his Son came before the blessing of our repentance and salvation. We give our first fruits in much the same way. Before we see the blessing of God, we give it in faith. Giving the first fruits of your income says to God, I recognize you first. I am putting you first in my life, and I trust you to take care of the rest.
Hey, most of you know me, but just to use the manners that were instilled in me by my mother, I am Kim Edmonds, and I'm part of your finance team. This is going to be just a little bit interactive, but even if you're an introvert, it's not going to be painful, okay? How many of you have to pay Huntsville Utilities or Fayetteville Utilities every month for the lights to stay on? Show of hands. Cool, okay. How many of you have to pay a phone bill if you still want to be able to talk to people? How many of you have to go to the store and spend money on toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies if you want to have a nice, decent home? What most of us don't think about is the church has all those expenses too. The church has many of the same expenses we each have to run our own households. To pay the expenses at our homes, most of us have an employer, we own a business, we have retirement income. The church has tithes, gifts, donations to pay those expenses. Not only do our tithes, gifts, and donations pay for those normal, everyday things like we do at home, but they also make it possible for us to love people and to reach into their lives like Jesus told us to. How many of you are happy and excited that we have a growing kids ministry? Cool. How many of you are pleased to see that our youth are learning about Jesus? Wasn't it great to see kids and youth getting baptized on Easter and hearing about the deep questions that they asked Pastor Mark? That's the money you give at work. Not just keeping the lights on and all that mundane stuff that kind of has to happen, but taking his light outside these walls to touch other lives. 90% of your giving is used here, and when I say here, not just in this building, but to reach out. 10% goes to the conference. Yep, a lot of us weren't raised Methodist, so we don't know this until somebody tells us. We don't receive money from them. We pay what's called an apportionment to them. And that apportionment, we trust them to use appropriately. They use it for outreach, and they use it to keep the lights on and buy the toilet paper and all the things we have to do here, just on a different scale. Just some food for thought, okay? Get the wheels turning, relate your house to God's house. If you have any questions about your giving or where it goes or what happens with it or the money in the church, you can talk to me. You can talk to Tony. Where are you? Raise your hand. Tony Cooper is the chair of our finance team. Margaret, would you raise your hand? Margaret Barton is also part of the team. And Penny, where are you? Penny is our treasurer, which should make all of you feel good because we all know about her organizational skills, okay? So those numbers between Tony and Penny, spot on. Thank you. Think about it.